If you listen to my presentations the last 2 years, the first year was about something very near and dear to my heart, which is investment in the semiconductor area, and specifically venture capital, and the challenges that the venture capital market is having, and why a lot of venture capital for hardware and semiconductors has dried up in the Valley. Last year, it was a little less about business, a little more about technology and vision, and I spoke about something that's very important to Rambus, but I did it in an industry context. Topic is also something near and dear to our heart at Rambus, and it's really about security. And the title is Driving the Need for Secure Foundations in a Connected World. I think it goes with the theme of this because I think it's something when you look out, and I'm going to talk about machine-to-machine, the Internet of Things, and why security is so fundamental to it, and why some of the rollout of the Internet of Things may be blocked by a lack of security. And some of the things that we've been doing at Rambus is more of an industry vision talk, but I'll tie in some of the things that we do specifically. So, we have benefited collectively from probably one of the greatest platforms, the GSM platform, and the mobile devices for, I guess, 20-some years now. Very impressively, if you watched at all the financial markets, Apple announced the largest quarterly profit ever, and I think 79% of that was through iPhone, so the mobile space. So mobile is great. We love mobile. It's the underpinning of much of what we do in the semiconductor industry. However, I've been saying for many years now that the rate of growth, at least, is going to be decreasing. So the second derivative was going from positive to negative. And that rate of decrease doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just entering a particular phase where maybe we're not going to see the dynamic growth and focus on mobile. So the industry has been looking for something for many years, a different platform, a different area. And it started with a description around machine to machine. About 10 years ago, that was the in vogue talk. Now it's about the Internet of Things, and we like to think of it as connected endpoints, and the fact that connected endpoints are the new mobile. And that's really the focus today, and I think very, again, relevant to what we're talking about as the theme of the conference. So if you look at IDC, they're projecting that there's going to be 50 billion connected devices by 2020. I keep on thinking about 2020 as being far away, but it's really not far away anymore. It's very, very close. So 50 billion things out there collecting data, 50 billion types of, or various types of sensors, all collecting data, and then people trying to take that data and turn it into information. And it's that information that is so valuable. I hate to say, while I love the semiconductor aspects and the software, the stuff that we do, the people who have really monetized things well, the Googles of the world, it wasn't about the technology per se. It was about getting to the data and figuring out how to turn it into information and then how to monetize that information. So, with all of that data out there, we like to think about it in a very overly simplified, and by the way, I'll take some CEO liberties in my description of technology here since I haven't done real work in 20 years, although I do have a PhD. And my team wouldn't let me do real work now, or we wouldn't be as successful as we are. So the unprecedented data proliferation is a real problem in the industry for the simple reason that most of it, if not much of it, is not secure. Whether it's at the endpoint, at some hub, which can be an access device in your home, or even your handset, or in the cloud. And I think you will all agree with me, just by reading the newspapers, that there is unprecedented number of security breaches out there. This is a really cool chart. If you can look on the slides later, there's a reference underneath. It's databreach.net. And they have a really cool chart that's kind of graphic and dynamic, and they can go through. And they actually take it. Here it just shows the 2014, but it goes for many, many years before that. And it's a little bit hard for me to read here, but you can probably see The thing on the right is the number of records that were breached in the various groups. So Home Depot was 56 million, JP Morgan Chase 76 million, Target 70 million, eBay 145 million. And you kind of notice that they're getting bigger and bigger as you go up in time on average. This is scary. This is scary. And these data breaches are happening at the data center, on the network or the edge, and at the device and the endpoints. In fact, IDC says that within 2 years, 90% of all IT networks will have had an IoT security breach. 90%. 90%. Something interesting to do. You should just go back to your company and talk to your IT professional and ask, how many attempts do you have to have a security breach just coming through normal emails? Our company is a relatively small company, and it's over 1 million a day. It's 1 million a day where people are trying to get into your systems. So you can only imagine how complicated this is and what a big problem. So this is not something that I'm forecasting. This is something that exists today, and if we collectively as an industry do not deal with it or deal with it better than we have been doing, I think we're going to have it, it's going to be very difficult to go this next phase. When we were looking around, what's the most pithy statement? This is the marketing team put this together. And we loved what John Chambers said. He's the CEO of Cisco. And Cisco, if you don't know, is investing very heavily on IoT. He said there's 2 types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that don't yet know they've been hacked. So if you're not worried, again, talk to your IT professional, and he'll probably quote something like that, and it's just the fear factor that you have. Now, having said that, not all endpoints are created equally. If you're in charge of a large bank and you wake up one day and your team says, we're missing $10 billion, that's kind of a big problem, right? That's a very, very big problem. Now, if you're at home and your connected lighting that you can buy in the Apple Store, for instance, gets hacked and it gets turned off and on, that's not maybe such a big, important thing. But you should think about it a different way in terms of how things might get hacked and create problems, not just in, let's say, the more richer part of the world, but what happens in this little diagram if your refrigerator gets hacked and you only have one refrigerator in the village that you're in. And that refrigerator, everybody's working to put foodstuffs in there, and that's really important to them. Well, that could be devastating to the village if for some reason it got hacked. Or if you have a washing machine and the 12-year-old next door adjusts the controls inside of it because it's connected to the internet and it catches fire and burns your house. So while I completely understand why we could say not all endpoints are created equally, I think security on all of them is very important, and they may be a very adverse impact at all socioeconomic levels around the globe. So, yesterday, I wasn't here. In fact, I came in at 3 o'clock in the morning, so if I'm a little less articulate, it's because I haven't slept. But somebody yesterday, one of my team members said software is not very secure. When I talk to the geniuses in our company, we have a very growing and large security business, they say software is incredibly unsecure. And I said, well, why? He said, well, it's always full of bugs. And I said, well, none of my software ever had bugs. It was always everybody else's, so I'm sure it wasn't mine. But then again, I'm probably thinking about it fondly because I got out of engineering probably because I wasn't all of that good at it. So maybe mine did have the bugs and they were just being nice. But if software has bugs and bugs can be exploited, and that's not really the best way to do it, the obvious question is, well, you kind of got to put the security somewhere, probably in silicon. And then is there a way to use that silicon to make sure everything's secure? So to create what the industry often calls is a root of trust. So you can think about it as any type of system or embedded system where before you actually boot the rich OS, you do a small boot and with this secure piece of silicon that can store cryptographic keys, and you can use keys to turn things off and on, and you can go and look at all of the registers and make sure everything's going the way that it should. And then once you're sure that everything's clean, you can pass it over to a rich OS to boot up the rest of the system. So we believe very strongly that the highest level of security is in silicon, and in fact, for most things, that's not only the most economic efficient, but long-term, the only way that the industry can go. We must have security and hardware roots of trust in the systems that we build. So what does that mean? How does that work then? Well, if you have a hardware root of trust, that's the cute little diagram of your mobile phone, and you had cryptographic keys, and those keys, you had to know the right key to be able to access a hard drive or access credit cards or transaction payments or the firewalls or any type of service that you have. If you had that and it resided in the devices, in fact, maybe it resided in all of the chips that you made, well, that would be fantastic, because then that element would be secure. You could always be counting on it to be highly secure, and it's only when you had the right cryptographic key that that would be available to you. So that's actually what we did working with one of our key customers, Qualcomm. In June of last year, we launched a product called Crypto Manager. And Crypto Manager is a hardware root of trust. It's a little cryptographic processor that we provide to Qualcomm. They integrate it into their application processor, their chips. And then to actually put the keys in, we provide a hardware server, really a secure server, ICM, and that secure server then puts the keys in during the manufacturing test process. So it's part of the manufacturing cycle. And then to be able to manage that remotely, because you don't always want to be at all of your fabs because they're distributed around the world, we actually have an enterprise class software. And that is really what's marked out on the left two darker blue covered boxes. What we worked with our customer to do is create a secure solution for an inherently unsecure manufacturing process that allows you to provision each of the pieces. And you say, well, why would you want to do that? Well, give me an example, Ron, why that would be interesting. Well, probably the best ports. The ports that you use for debug, they're really great because they let you look inside a device and see all of the registers and do things. Well, but that's also what somebody who wants to hack the system might want to do. So when you're designing a microprocessor that's very complex, of course you have a JTAG port, and you actually have the ability in an integrated development environment system to actually bring it up and look at all this stuff. It's inherent. But then you would like to, in manufacturing, be able to turn that off to make sure there's not a backdoor into the chip. Well, there is another problem sometimes you have, because, of course, none of the chips we make ever have any bugs, but every once in a while, chips from other companies have bugs, and when they do have a bug, you want to be able to test and find that out. So if you have an RMA, a chip coming back from a customer, he wants to know it, geez, you'd like to have that JTAG port that's on. Well, what happens if using cryptographic keys, you can turn it off when you don't want it, and people can't get in without the key, or you can turn it on when you do need it. So that's a brilliant solution to a classical problem, something when I was doing semiconductor microprocessors at IBM, we fretted over and couldn't figure out a way to do it. Well, that's what we just solved. And that's what we're working very, very hard with